you're back in the one place that you can get expert analysis from a center-right perspective in the state of Illinois. That's the Smoke-Filled Room, and we are here, and it's a great week because not only do we have our usual guests, our political team, we've got a returning guest, we've got a returning political team member who's been with us for a long time, and we got one of our best friends joining us as well. This is going to be an awesome episode. Let me do some introductions, and then we'll get right into it. Bill Pohlman is the vice chairman of the Palatine Township Republican Organization. He's also the assessor for Palatine Township, and he's been a friend for a very long time, though he shows his age a lot more than I show my age. Bill Pohlman is with us this week.
Be nice, Collin.
Hey, I got an hour plus of not having to be nice to you on the record. I'm very excited. And Bill, you just celebrated a pretty big milestone, didn't you?
One that we don't talk about.
Oh, come on. Let the audience know the milestone.
All right. I turned 70 at the end of June.
There we go. Bill, the 70-year-old. He's the combined age of the rest of our 5 participants this week. So let me get to them. We also have Nathan Hoffman, who's been with us before, and we're pumped to have him back with us again. He is the Senior Director of State Policy and Advocacy at the Foundation for Excellence in Education. We've got some big education topics this week, so we're pumped to have Nathan with us. Nathan, glad you're here, man.
Hey, great. Glad to be joining you guys again.
Repping the U of I there too, right?
Right, that's right.
I like it. We also have joining us somebody who is not going to be new to anybody who's watched this podcast for a while. It's Matthew Duray. He was a longtime guest on the Smoke-Filled Room. He has been involved in politics in Lake County at every level, from the YRs to being a candidate himself to serving as vice chairman of the party. Matt, glad to have you here.
Let's have some fun.
Last time we had you with us, Vivek Ramaswamy was still in the presidential race. So kind of excited to hear your take on where things stand today.
Maybe he'll be the Democrats' nominee. We never know.
We also have, of course, political team members. We have Chris Jackowiak from Northern Illinois, Michael Butler from Southern Illinois. Guys, glad you're here.
Always a pleasure, Collin. Now that Duray's back, can I exclude myself from talking about like Lake County stuff and Northern Cook stuff or something like that?
Considering you don't actually know what you're talking about, it's probably a good idea. Butler, you ready to bring some heat this week?
Absolutely. Always ready.
All right. Well, let's go to our first topic, and I'm going to put my political team members on the line right now on this first topic. Anybody who's watched our episodes for the last few weeks here, you know that we've started a new segment here where I debate one or both of the political members of our team, but we're actually going to change it up this week. We're going to do a little bit different. We're actually going to have them debate each other on a topic because there's a topic that they disagree on, and we're going to have some fun with it. So let's introduce this segment.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Our boy, that escalated quickly, the Anchorman quote segment. This is Chris and Michael debating our next topic, which is Black voters become major focus for November elections. I know all of us, including myself, are going to have thoughts on this topic, but we're going to let Chris and Michael debate this because Michael thinks that this is a good thing that Republicans are focusing on reaching out to Black voters and it will make a big impact on the election. Chris thinks the opposite. Michael, let's let you kick us off.
All right. I just point to some of the polling that we've seen over the course of the past couple of months that show that we're making inroads with African-American voters, especially males, under the age of 30. We'll see how that plays out, but I think that there's an opportunity there. And Trump has some good points to bring up related to that issue, whether it's opportunity zones, school choice, which I know is very important to Nathan and what he does day to day. African-American unemployment and things of that nature whenever he was president compared to the situation that we're in now. So I think that's an opportunity that we've got ahead of us that we need to take advantage of. And I think it'll play dividends in certain states, especially, Georgia, Michigan, places like that where there is an African-American population. And those are important states in this election.
Chris, what do you think, man?
I don't disagree that African-American voters move slowly in this election. My disagreement comes from Joe Biden's no longer the nominee. And the polling that Michael is citing was done still in office, and he was having problems American voters, and you were seeing some polls having Trump as high 25% with African American voters. I don't think that's the case any longer. Now you have Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket. She's an African American female. In addition, I fear that the Republicans are running into the same trap they find themselves in every. This is the election cycle. African American voters finally wake up, get out of the Democratic Party, and they come in droves to the Republican Party. And it's this mentality that forces Republicans to go to events like the Black Journalists Association, where Trump had a terrible day and made a fool out of himself trying to appeal to that audience, which was never going to be receptive to him in the first place. So I fear that the Republican Party is getting their priorities mixed up. It's the same thing every year. We talk about the African Americans are coming to the Republican Party. They may come slightly, but they never come in huge numbers. And I get lambasted when I look at polling and I say that Arabs are moving to the Republican and we should reach out to them. And then I get told that that's not going to work either. So I'm just concerned. I think there's some merit to reaching out to African American voters, but I don't think that's where we should putting all of our expecting some great return from it.
Well, I agree with that. I think that, it's not.
Hold on,
it's
you
not
agree?
that
Come on, you guys need to disagree. This is so boring if you agree.
No,
Fight,
I think that this is a issue of like the margins. It's not like, oh, we're going to get, 35% of the African American vote and it's going to be this big, groundswell of support. I think it's
But that's what the polling. That's what the polling you were citing was
25%, right? 25%.
That's a big boost considering among Black voters, Republicans tend to get in the single digits or low teens. So 25% is actually a huge move. Here's what I would say. Chris is right. All the polling is certainly from before Harris was the nominee. We need new polling. We need fresh polling. So let's make that clear. However, you have the last 4 to 6 years of data that show, especially in the state of Illinois, when we look at East St. Louis and the Madison County, St. Clair region, when you look at Chicago, we have not just polls, we have election after election that have shown that Black turnout has been at record lows because the Democratic Party does not represent what Black voters are looking for right now as they go further and further into the far crazy left. And so I don't know that this is just a function of Biden versus Harris. This has been a trend beyond just who's at the top of the ticket for Democrats. So I'm curious, Michael or Chris, what you guys think about that. But this is not a new trend we're seeing. Well, yes, Harris does make a difference, and I'd like to see some new polling. It's not as if this is just a new phenomenon from 5 minutes ago.
Well, I think we really need to hone in on that African-American male population, especially on the younger end. And I think there's a lot of opportunities there because, a lot of the issues that we advocate for as Republicans are issues that are important to them, especially when it comes to like small business, entrepreneurship, things of that nature. They're looking for that because they want those opportunities, especially that age bracket.
The Republican Party can barely turn out the voters who actually like them. We don't even have the infrastructure in place in our own communities and our own areas where the Republican vote is stronger, or not even stronger. Even in areas that are like swingy or whatever, we don't have infrastructure in those places. So the idea that we can artificially create an infrastructure in communities which are voting 90-10 against the Republican Party overnight, persuading them to vote Republican, is just foolish. I think that if you had an infinite amount of money and an infinite amount of time, you can persuade the African-American demographic more and more every year, and you might be able to get them on the Republican Party side. But the problem is you're trying to upend basically decades of African-American support for the Democratic ticket with basically no resources, no money, especially in this state. So I think our priority, we should put I'm not saying that we shouldn't outreach to these people, because not outreaching to these people gets us into trouble all the time, and we have no idea how to message them. We saw that this week with Trump. But I do not think that this is what's going to flip the election, guys. This is what's going to save the state of Illinois. This is what's going to save the Trump presidency. It's not. There's more, there are other things and other buckets that we can hit other than just the African American.
All right, I'm not ready to pick a winner just yet. Let's open it up to our 3 guests. I'd be remiss if I didn't say, Nathan, if you want to speak first, you probably know more about this than any of the rest of us, so you're welcome to speak first. Matt and Bill, I'd also be open to your thoughts as well.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm I'm a Black Republican who's voting for Trump in November, and I didn't need any, money from the Republican Party to necessarily convince me to do so. But I don't know. I look at first of all, I agree that I think Trump's performance yesterday was at Trump at his worst. I think there's a lot of different reasons for that, but I also think that he's doing himself a disservice, and so is the apparatus around him by focusing on, is Kamala Black? Is she Indian? Is she Asian? Nobody cares about that. But in the grand scheme of things, like Kamala Harris, let's not forget, Kamala Harris, the last time she had to stand on her own, didn't make it to Iowa. Black voters didn't choose Kamala last time. She was anointed last time as the next Obama, and Black voters didn't choose her. Jim Clyburn didn't choose her. Nobody chose her. So at some point, to me, like we've got to do more. The Trump team needs to do more to focus on the issues. If you focus on what Kamala has said, despite what her team is now trying to pretend she didn't say, nobody is with her, for the most part, including a majority, or I would guess a majority of Black voters. Just look at the South Side of Chicago. Everything that's been happening with the migrants and all of that stuff is churning up dissatisfaction among longtime Black Democrats, or at least people who have always, maybe they don't identify as Democrats, but they've supported Democrats for a long time. So there are issues that the Republican Party, if we can figure out how to stay on message, which it's not clear to me we can at this point, but if we can figure out how to stay on message, I think you're not going to get 25%, but can you get a little bit more than what we've gotten in the past in places that actually matter? Like Michael mentioned, I think should be the goal.
Yeah, listen, I think you made a really good point about Harris flip-flopping. I mean, is there an issue she hasn't flip-flopped on in the last 7 to 10 days? I mean, if you focus on her record, we talked about this on last week's episode. I mean, her record as just being a prosecutor. If she wants to make that a central theme of her campaign, I don't know how that really works with the push for criminal justice reform that you see most Black voters really wanting and most Black leaders pushing. So I don't know how she really plays beyond, yes, Black female turnout likely will be a little bit better, but that wasn't where I've forgotten his name because he's gone at this point. That wasn't where Biden was hurting. Biden was hurting with Black males, not with Black females. So that's where he was the weakest. That's where Harris is going to struggle the most. And I don't know what stances she holds that are going to really help there. Bill, I know you're looking to jump in here.
Yeah, I'm listening to all the things you guys are talking about how Republicans are going to get the Black vote. You guys are forgetting that the Democrats are going out of their way to try and drive the Black vote away from them. Nathan touched on it. I mean, the immigration issue in Chicago. I mean, you're hearing countless people complaining about all of the money that's going towards the migrants that is going away from the Blacks. And I mean, and then on top of that, I mean, the cost of living, the cost of gas. I mean, the Democrats have got a track record of failure. And if anything, that's going to drive people to the Republican Party.
I mean, the more this becomes about policies instead of personalities, we're absolutely going to be doing much, much better in November. So that's where I think you guys are right that Trump's performance this week in Chicago was bad, simply because we need this race to not be about personalities. We need it to be about policies, because on policy, we're going to win, and we're going to win going away. But if this thing becomes a referendum on Trump, that's where we're going to struggle, because a lot of voters don't like him and his personality. That's just the reality.
Well, I have to agree with Chris that if anything, it'd be a long-term play. I mean, Black voters are only around 14% of the voting population, and most of those people are in areas that it really wouldn't have any effect in November. I mean, we're talking Texas, New York City, California, Florida, maybe Georgia would be the only place that it would matter. But in the key swing states, we're not seeing enough Black voters that even if we did turn them all out to vote, and even turn them out to vote Republican, it's going to make a big difference in November. So I think it's something we can slowly chip away at for the next few years. But for all these people to say we need to focus on Black voters this November, that's going to make or break the election, I don't think that is accurate at all.
All right, Michael and Chris, your final arguments before we pick a winner here.
What money do we have and what resources do we have to do any of the things discussed and how we can move African Americans towards our party? If you gave Kevin Schmidt $1 billion, he might be able to get 25% of the black vote in his district. Maybe not 1 billion. Maybe you give him 1 million. Really push hard. Really focus on that community. 5%. I don't think that's likely across the board, and I don't think that's going to be likely for a very long time. If we had money, we had resources, we'd look 10 years from now and say this is possible. Right now, I don't think it is.
Michael?
I just think that like I said, it's an issue of the margins, and whatever improvement we can make there, I think has an impact in general. You just target specific regions where we have some of these issues, south side of Chicago or Atlanta, et cetera, where people are looking for something different. They're dissatisfied with what the Democrat Party stands for currently, and you just point out a lot of those flip-flops of Kamala and how she tries to play both sides of every issue. I don't think it's gonna be make a massive impact, but there's opportunities there, and we need to start making some of those investments and see what we can do over the long term, because politics is a long-term game.
All right, so you guys move the goalposts a little bit in your arguments, which will make it tougher to pick a winner here. But let me just real quick point something out. I'm pulling up our election analysis from this last election, and I'm doing this on the fly, so give me just a second here. But I'm pulling up districts where the record low black turnout actually had an impact in districts that were in maybe not tier 1 districts, but tier 2, tier 3 districts where this actually had a decent impact. I'm almost done making this list. I have 2 more districts to add, and then I can tell you which districts really stand out to me. 113, 114. All right. So again, not all these are going to be tier 1 districts. Some of them will be, but I'm looking at in the Senate, there's 2 districts where the low black turnout actually impacted the final election results. Joyce in Senate District 40, Belt in 57. Both are tough to beat, especially Belt, who's not even up right now. But Joyce is kind of on the fringe of maybe being a district we can look at. And there's a decent black electorate in that district. On the House side, Republicans keep saying we want to go after Maurice West in House District 67, and low black turnout had an impact in that race last time. Schuster in 96, Jay Hoffman in 113, and Greenwood, or now Schmidt, in 114. All of those are districts where there was up to a 4% drop by the Democrat candidate simply because of the low black turnout. So not to say this is going to have a huge impact on elections, but some of those districts, if you can move 3 or 4 points just because of this one factor, that could be the difference in one of those elections, especially Schmidt. So I do think this is going to have an impact more than I think, Chris, you're given to say. Any final words you want to say in response to that?
I think 2022 was a completely different cycle. And I also think that if black turnout is going to be low, why would you stimulate it at all?
All right. Well, it's tough to pick a winner, but I got to keep Chris's losing streak alive. So, Michael, you get the win, if only to go drive Chris crazy. And let's move on to our next topic here. So let's talk about this. It seems to be a concerted effort here by Democrats to start a new message, calling Republicans weird. And honestly, I don't know that I have fully formulated my thoughts on this. So I just want to open it up to 5 of you. Have you seen this? Have you read about this? And what do you think about it? Because it's not as if it's just been one thing. I mean, even Pritzker did an interview with Stephanopoulos, and he brought it up several times, talking about how weird Republicans are, Trump is, J.D. Vance is. This is not in a small thing. This seems to be a clear messaging tact. And I don't really understand it, nor do I think it's going to work, to be honest. But I'll open it up to the 5 of you on, have you seen this and what the heck is going on?
From what I see, it kind of originated with Governor Walz of Minnesota. He said it in an interview and then kind of spread it amongst, some of those higher level Democrats. And they have been using this talking point, I guess, for the last probably week or so. And I just think it's a mistake by the Democrats. If they want to make this election about who is weird and who is normal, there's a lot of material on the Democrat side that we can point to from high level, elected officials, staffers, et cetera, of very weird behavior. I think about the staffer that Biden hired that was dressing like a woman and stealing women's luggage at the airport. all the drag queen stuff, which I don't think, very many voters approve of or think that it's appropriate. There's just a lot of material on the Democrat side for us to point at and say, we're the normal ones, they're the weird ones. And I think a lot of these Democrat elected officials at the high level have kind of gotten into this like Hollywood bubble, and their definition of what normal is very different than what the definition the American public has. So I think it's a mistake.
I agree. I mean, I for everything that you just said, but then I also think that it's an opportunity, particularly in the case of JD Vance, who seems to be the focus of the weird movement. I mean, I don't know, I think it's an opportunity to kind of juxtapose and flip it back around to, I won't assume. If you've read Hillbilly Elegy and JD Vance's story, I mean, there's nothing more kind of American dream, there's no more better American dream story than his. And so if the idea is, oh, JD Vance is weird, then it's weird to, grow up in a household with a drug addicted parent, all of the issues that came with that, go on to serve in the military, go on to Yale Law School, do everything that he's done. If that's weird, then we're in a weird place, to use that word, in America. So you could run an ad probably for 3 minutes straight of all of the weird stuff that the Democrats have done at the White House, nonetheless, over the last 3.5 years, which would be entertaining. But I think, again, getting back to kind of issues, flipping it around and focusing on JD Vance's story might do good to rehabilitate his image a little bit, but also to juxtapose what we in the Republican Party see as very normal and aspirational and all that stuff versus the chaos of the Democrats.
Seems like a classic case of projection. I mean, the Democrats have done a lot of things, and voters are starting to see that they are kind of out there and loony. But if they could just say it enough about Republicans, then they might think that it'll stick with voters. And I also think that the past few election cycles, they've kind of done the really hardball tactic of Republicans are racist and they're evil and they hate women. So maybe if they can kind of lighten the gas a little bit and go with something that makes people think, oh, how are they weird? Because people have glossed over those super aggressive terms. And it might be an effective marketing strategy that we haven't seen before. So we'll see.
Or maybe it's just, this is their response to, they know they got to pull back the rhetoric after the last couple of weeks of craziness. So maybe this is where they're going to. So Matt, it's not a crazy thought. And I've seen no polling on this, so I guess maybe it could work. It just seems strategically like has no chance of working, but I've been surprised before.
Seems weird.
Bill, I know you're weird and proud of it. I mean, does this message resonate with you?
Collin, I really joining you for this. The only problem what I see is, to be honest with you, is Trump does have a tendency to stick his foot in his mouth. And JD Vance did do that the other day with his interview about talking about family and that. So trust me, if Republicans are weird, I'm weird. I want to not spend money for things that we don't need. If that makes me weird, that makes me weird. But
I mean, it's a number one rule in politics. Don't push in your message something that can open you up to challenges. And I think, Michael, you started off this whole discussion in a pretty accurate spot, which is like, why would you hit us for being weird when, frankly, the American people's sense of what's weird falls more against the left right now than it does the right. And so you open yourself up to this challenge, especially when pretty much everyone has agreed that the road to the White House goes through the Midwest at this point. Even if something might not be weird on the coasts, it's considered weird in the Midwest and middle America and flyover America. So this idea that you would open yourself up to this kind of an attack line when most of your target states are more Midwestern sort of conservative-ish values and traditional American values, more or less. It seems politically dumb, which, hey, listen, I'll grab my popcorn and let the Democrats do something pretty dumb. So if in the convention they want to keep talking about Republicans are weird on national television, I'm all for it. It just seems like this is a misstep. And I think that if Democrats continue down this path, Republicans in Illinois, which is our audience, should take advantage of it. Point out all the different ways that Democrats in the state have proven just how weird they are. Think about IL 17. I don't think there's a lot of Illinois 17th congressional district voters who agree with the Democrat incumbent Eric Sorensen house and doing drag shows for kids. I think those are the kind of things that the average voters out there think is kind of weird. So if Democrats want to open up this door, I say barrel it open and take advantage of it.
Well, and it kind of reminds me, when I first heard this, it kind of reminded me of that 2016 election where Hillary Clinton said, oh, Republicans are like a basket of deplorables. And it's like, okay, you want people to vote for you, and then you're like offending half the country and saying that they're weird, they're deplorables. You go down racist, sexist, homophobic. You go down the list of all the things that they've accused people of being. And Hillary calling people a basket of deplorables in 2016 didn't work out very well for her. A lot of people, embraced it. There were T-shirts and, Facebook posts. Yeah, I'm a deplorable and I'm proud of it, So I don't think they learned from that mistake, and we'll see how it plays out for them.
Well, it's clear they haven't learned from any of their mistakes. I mean, I've talked about this on previous episodes. My wife and I have talked about it a lot, which is, the left continues to talk down to most everyday Americans. They've been doing it for especially the last decade. It's what created Donald Trump. It's the reason why working class, lesser educated people, lower to middle income people, working families, it's why they started to turn on Democrats and move to the Republican Party in the first place. And it might be very well why Trump gets reelected yet again. The more they continue to talk down to most Americans as if we're weird or deplorable or just these horrible human beings because we think some of these things are a little bit weird. Maybe we say it's okay. Whatever you want to do in your household is fine. I'm not going to look down on it. I'm not going to outlaw it, but I'm not going to say it's normal either. And the more they continue to talk down to a majority of Americans, the more those Americans are going to revolt. The problem is they revolt by electing people like Donald Trump. So, if you really care about this country, maybe stop doing stuff like this. All right, let's move on to our next. Duray, be our final word here, and then we'll move on to the next topic.
I was just going to say, I don't think it's coincidental timing that when the whole JD Vance couch cushion thing happened and everyone's like, what the heck is this? I think this was maybe Democrats trying to capitalize on that. And everyone's response was, oh, if that's true, that's kind of weird. So I think that's where they were trying to run with that. I don't know if it'll stick.
We're going to find out. All right, let's have a little bit of a fun exercise. Our buddy Patrick Finkston over the Illinois started a bit of a conversation this week asking what happens in Illinois if J.B. Pritzker is selected as Harris's VP, or for the sake of this conversation, just if he goes to D.C. Let's say, I'm not saying I want this to happen, but just for this discussion, let's say Harris were to win, but she hasn't chosen Pritzker as her VP. And then he gets a job in the White House as something. I don't know. So the point of this discussion is what happens if Pritzker leaves Illinois at some point over the next 12 months? Obviously, that means that Juliana Stratton, the CTU handpicked lieutenant governor of Illinois, would take over as governor. I'm sure that makes Nathan very excited. And it means a lot of dominoes are going to fall here in the state of Illinois. So I'm just going to open this up again to your thoughts on what the heck happens in Illinois if Pritzker were to leave for one reason or another. And we get a new governor. We get, I'm sure, a wide open governor's race for 2026. There's dominoes that might happen down in Springfield. Someone has to get elevated to light gov. So much would happen here if Pritzker were to vacate. So what are you guys' thoughts? What happens here if Pritzker leaves?
So Collin, a few more Republicans on the Don ticket are going to win because I don't think Pritzker is going to be putting as much money into the candidates.
Yeah, for sure.
Collin, I will give you a play-by-play of what is going to happen if J.B. Pritzker goes to D.C. Juliana Stratton will become governor, or she will simply be the front runner to be the gubernatorial nominee in 2026. There will be a contested gubernatorial primary on the Democratic side, which will be against Juliana.
Hold on, Chris, you keep cutting out. I don't know if it's just for me or for everybody. We lost what you said. Who would be the nominee?
Juliana Stratton will be the nominee, but she will win by a closer margin than anybody expects. On the Republican side of things, it'll be an absolute clown car. And in the end, Darren Bailey will be the nominee for governor again, and then the Republicans will lose yet again when they would have had a perfect opportunity to beat Juliana Stratton. And then the Republicans will also lose seats in the House and Senate because of it. That is my prediction. That is what's going to happen, and none of you are prepared for that reality.
Chris, you are such a pessimist.
I mean, I think we can all agree it certainly makes the governor's office a lot more attainable for Republicans if Pritzker were to vacate. I think that's not necessarily a point we would disagree on, right? So, I mean, there already it does increase our odds. So Chris's pessimism aside, there at least is some light here.
I'm optimistic because if he goes to DC, we always have thought that he's always had national aspirations. If he changes his main playing field from Illinois to the United States, if he becomes VP, he's going to run for president. We all know that. And that'll mean he has to spend all this money that he has across the whole nation, and hopefully not as much in Illinois. So I'm really excited. I hope he becomes the VP candidate, and I hope he runs for president either now or in 4 years, because that'll get him off our backs.
Yeah, that seems, I mean, it certainly seems likely. Listen, I have told plenty of people, and I think I've said it on this podcast, but if I haven't, I'm just going to say it now. I don't think Pritzker runs for governor again either way. I have no intel that says he does or doesn't run. Here is the sole reason why I think Pritzker's not going to run. I hate to say it, but I think Pritzker and his team are actually pretty politically astute. It makes me throw up in my mouth to admit it, but it's true. And they're astute enough to know that the only reason that our finances in the state have looked pretty good is because of federal money flowing into the economy and flowing into the state. That is the only reason. Even though publicly they try to deny it, we all know that's the case. And even his people privately admit that that is the case. That is stopping. We have fiscal cliffs coming up because of the transit problems, which that could be up to $1 billion. You've got the state that could be up to $1 billion, if not more, out of whack going into next year's budget. And it's only going to get worse in the next couple of years. The worst job in Illinois would be to be governor after this term. That is going to be the worst job in Illinois, because you're going to have multi-billion-dollar deficits. You're going to have all sorts of challenges. You might have to deal with a recession. Nobody, if you're in your right mind, should want to be governor next term, including J.B. Pritzker. If he leaves now, he gets to say, look at all the amazing things I did. The state is way better off than I came in. And no one's going to be like, yeah, because you got COVID funds. He's going to get to run on that positive message. If he sticks around one more term, all of those numbers, which frankly aren't actually doing this, we're still 48th, 47th, 49th in the country on almost every metric, but whatever, he has a favorable press, so it seems like things are better. They're going to crater in the next 4 or 5 years, and Pritzker is smart enough to know he doesn't want his name on that. So whether he goes to DC or not, I don't think Pritzker is going to run for that simple reason. So no matter what the reason is, I think it's an open race for governor next time around. And I think if Stratton is the nominee on the Democratic side, Nathan, I know you and others here could speak to just how crazy progressive she is. She makes Pritzker look like he's a conservative, and Pritzker's probably the most progressive governor we've ever had. And Stratton makes him look like he's a conservative.
Yeah, that's right. And I also wonder where Alexi Janulius, who I hear or I read is out with an injury, so we don't get any more gym videos of him working out or
tummy time photos.
Tummy time, yeah, it's weird. That's weird if you want to talk about something that's weird. But I just wonder where Alexi fits into this, because I could see, it seems to me like he's done a lot to try and beef up his progressive bona fides. He's gotten very close, even closer to organized labor, and he's clearly very good at raising money and just, they called him like the second coming of Obama back in the day. So, I wonder where he fits into this, and if he puts up a strong enough challenge, wins some downstate districts who maybe don't want Juliana, and winds up the nominee if he chooses.
Well, there's certainly people with ambition. I mean, Janulius, you're 100% right. Just look at what he did in Springfield the last couple of years. No other statewide was as active in pushing bills, sponsoring bills, or putting his name behind bills, doing press conferences. I mean, it was to the point where it was kind of a bit much. How much he was down in Springfield playing in the legislative session. He was playing more than Pritzker was. So he clearly has ambition. Mendoza has ambition. Raja, though he's probably looking towards the Senate, but he has ambition. I mean, it's to assume, and Chris is right, there will be other people looking at this. But my assumption is that Pritzker will clear the field for Stratton, and then all those other candidates, they're all in for Durbin's seat if Durbin decides not to run for Senate. That's just my guess as to how this plays out. But Chris, you might be right that they all put in for governor too. But it seems like Pritzker's last thing that he does in Illinois will be to clear the decks for Stratton in the governor's race, and then maybe give her a few bucks while he then leaves the state and brings his horrible policies to the nation.
Well, basically, I heard about we have 2 state fairs in the state of Illinois, right? We have the Springfield State Fair, and then we have the DuQuoin State Fair.
We actually have a lot more state fairs than that, Michael, but I get your point.
Yeah, that's true. At least, probably so. But we have Springfield, DuQuoin. Last year at the DuQuoin State Fair, I heard that J.B. Pritzker met with some of the downstate Democrats and asked them, he said, I may not run for a third term for governor. And if I don't run for a third term, will you help Julia Stratton with her campaign? So he was already kind of priming that. And I don't know. We'll see what happens. I think obviously JB Pritzker has a very elevated view of how skilled he is. Obviously, he did not have a very, tough race in 2018 or in 2022. He kind of ran away with both of them, for different reasons both times. But I think that he thinks very highly of himself. And I think that he thinks that he's going to, be catapulted to, a higher level, whether that's through the vice presidency or through some cabinet position if Kamala Harris were to win. But I think eventually reality has got to set in, and I don't know that he is going to be as successful as he thinks that he's going to be. And I would agree that, Julia Stratton gets in there. She runs maybe next election if Pritzker doesn't. But I think it's going to be a clown car. There's going to be a lot of other people that are going to be angling for that. And you look at some of those quotes that Patrick was able to get in that article, and he had some, anonymous quotes from some Democrats that said, we don't think that Julia Stratton is ready for prime time. We don't think she's ready to be governor. And they alluded, to some of the things that you mentioned about how progressive she is and how that's not going to play very well in central and southern Illinois. So we'll see what happens, but
I just look at the political realities. Juliana Stratton is just like Kamala Harris in this sense that once Biden was out, the political reality of the Democratic Party is such that you couldn't choose anybody but Harris. You can't pass over a black female in this environment if you're the Democratic Party. You can't. It's just not possible. And so I think the same thing's going to happen in Illinois, which is if Pritzker steps out, then Stratton, again, you have that same dynamic. You can't step over a black female to choose a white male. You just can't do it. Not in today's environment as the Democratic Party. And so I come back to that the political realities here are it's going to be Stratton's to lose. Now, because she's a progressive, that will hurt her in the general election, but it will help her, frankly, in the primary. CTU will push her very hard, which means some of the other teachers' unions may come along. Pritzker will push her hard. He'll probably give her $10 or $20 million to make sure she glides through the primary. I just think the realities are such that it should be really hard to beat, even if she did pull opponents, which is why, listen, if Durbin doesn't step down, if he runs again, then yes, it'll be a clown car race because there's only one statewide worth running for. Everybody will run for it. But if Durbin doesn't run again, which is the rumor right now, then I think all these other candidates fight for that. And Stratton will run against a bunch of no-names for governor on the Democratic side, which I think helps the Republicans. I think you see the media has been favorable to Pritzker for a number of reasons, and Stratton won't enjoy that exact same level of favorability with the media. They've covered for a lot of Pritzker's progressive views. They won't be able to cover for Stratton's progressive views. I think this opens up opportunities for Republicans across the state. You won't have Pritzker's money to contend with, which is what Bill pointed out. You won't have as favorable of a media as Pritzker gets right now. And you're not going to have Pritzker's political operation because they're going to go with him. They're not going to stick here in Illinois to run Stratton's race. They're going to go federal with Pritzker. So I think this does open the door for Republicans to see a lot of wins in 26, 28, 30. And let's be honest, it's all about 2030. This is all about taking the governor's mansion and or the majority by 2030 so we have a voice in the remap in 2032. That's what this is all about. And so if Stratton is the nominee in 26, that opens up opportunities for us. And let's be honest, if she wins, that isn't necessarily the worst thing because the economy in Illinois is going to be rough. The budget's going to be difficult to manage. The fact that she would have to own that and the Democrats would have to own that from 26 to 30, that just might open up a complete tsunami of Republican wins in 2030. So again, I sometimes can be too much of an optimist, and I know I'm going to get texts for being this optimistic, but I do think there are a lot of opportunities for Republicans, and it starts with Pritzker's going to go away.
No,
well,
actually,
I would just say that I agree with everything you just said, Collin. But the one thing that I would add is, what does Mendoza do? Because I think that, if it's a one-on-one race, Stratton versus Mendoza, I think Mendoza would definitely have a path. You kind of divide that diversity caucus within the Democrat Party between, do you want to go with somebody that's Hispanic or do you want to go with somebody that's African-American? There's a lot of frictions there. We've seen that, in the legislature, especially on the House side. And Mendoza is kind of seen as more of like, especially on the budget issues, she's seen as kind of a safer choice, a lot more reasonable.
Except the Pritzker people all hate her. But hold on, Chris, do you want to take this or should I?
She wants to run for mayor of Chicago. She doesn't want to run for governor.
But even if she did, you want to take this? Do you think Mendoza beats Stratton in a Democratic primary statewide?
No.
Either you whack this or I do, man. Come on.
I don't know. I don't think she does. Judging from what the track record is against the African American progressive candidate, you're going to take that statewide. I mean, Mendoza would have to put up dictator margins across in what Democratic voters exist in downstate Illinois in the Democratic primary to have a prayer against Juliana Stratton, because
people need to understand, Chris, you're not doing a good enough job. Come on, let's go. People need to understand the gap that exists in the Democratic Party between the Hispanic caucus and the Black caucus, especially right now because of migrant funding in the city of Chicago. Do you really see, Chris, I'm asking you, do you really see a Hispanic winning statewide right now in the state of Illinois if there is a Black female in the ticket in the Democratic primary? Come on, man.
If the entire trade union apparatus gave Mendoza $1 bajillion and she ran the greatest campaign of all time, she might.
And does Mendoza have a history of running the greatest campaigns of all time?
No. So
yeah, exactly. And listen, Michael, if this was a runoff state, or if, let's say, Mendoza could somehow find her way into a general election against Stratton, Mendoza could win. She would absolutely beat Stratton in a general election contest between the two of them. And so I don't know how the heck she makes that happen. There's probably no way. But in a Democratic primary, Mendoza's profile of being more moderate, of being more fiscally conservative, of being Hispanic, none of that is going to play in a race against Juliana Stratton. Again, we got to remember, the Democratic primary goes far, far, far left. They're going to love Stratton.
Well, I mean, I'm going to stop while I'm ahead here. But here's what I'm going to say, Collin, is that we're going into the weeds here. And you know me, I love talking about the Democratic Party because it's the only thing that actually matters in this state at the end of the day. But on the other hand, I want to say, if Juliana Stratton's the nominee for governor in 2026, there's no reason why Republicans should lose. Zero reason. But they're going to find every reason to lose. That's what we're forgetting here. Because this is the Republican show. We're supposed to all act like Republicans here. So shouldn't we have the conversation of what the Republican Party is going to look like in that primary? And it's going to be an absolute disaster.
Well, we have talked about that on previous episodes. So I encourage our listeners, check back. Lane does a bunch of work to give you the time codes. We have talked about who is the Republican nominee in 2026, and we will talk about it again. But let's move on, Chris. Appreciate your thoughts there. I've been a little hard on you, but not as hard as I've been on Bill. So you're all right. Speaking of Bill, let's go to Bill because it's not often we have a township assessor on our podcast. We're going to go to some Chicago and Cook County topics, which I know makes Chris excited because he never gets to talk about Chicago and Cook County. But we've got an assessor here, and we've got an education expert here. So there's a couple topics we must get to this week. First is just, I'm going to say it. What the hell is going on with property taxes in Cook County? Is this just because we have a crazy county assessor who's way far left in Fritz Kagi, or what is leading to this? You have seen massive increases, especially in the south suburbs. Some of these bills are going up about 20%. We're doing some work right now in an area where some of their bills have gone up by $2,000 this year, thanks to Kagi and these assessments. It is just nutso out there. Bill, what the heck is going on?
Well, I just want to know where you heard 20%. I mean, it's not 20%. Palatine Township is 28%.
Well, there you go. What's been reported, at least, this is from the Tribune, is that the north and northwest suburbs jumped an average of 16%. The south suburbs jumped an average of about 20%. I'm sure some regions are worse than that. I'm just taking those from the Tribune. You'd know better than me, though.
No, it's.
So hold on. So you said Palatine Township went up 28%?
Yeah.
Sheesh.
Fritz Kagi is doing all kinds of favors for the Republican Party. First, he messed around with the commercial properties, and now he's messing around with residential. And I mean, yes, property values went up dramatically, but the pressure that he's putting on there is killing people. I mean, I'm in the appeals period right now in Palatine Township, and I've done a little over 1,000 appeals in the last 3 weeks. Last year, right after the first reassessment, I did almost 3,000 appeals. And I'm getting people calling me on a regular basis saying, I can't afford to pay my taxes. That's going to drive a lot of people towards voting Republican because they're blaming this all on the Democrats.
I mean, I don't know who else you can blame it on. I mean, you look at just the push here to raise property taxes, despite the rhetoric that they want to lower it, whether it's coming out of Springfield, coming out of Kagi's office, coming out of Cook County, coming out of Chicago. They continue to do things that force property tax hikes on local residents. And you're right, this is an opening, but as Chris always says, Republicans actually have to take advantage. But cost of living continues to rise, and taxes are just one of those aspects of the cost of living. And it is absolutely getting unaffordable to live in these regions, if not the whole state, but especially right now in the Chicagoland area, especially in the suburban Cook. It is just becoming absolutely unaffordable for working families.
Yeah, Kagi's approaching a designation I have created in politics known as a political terrorist. Somebody who has no regard for what's going on around them politically, governmentally. It's just whatever he views the world as being, he's going to strive for it. He's going to take out anybody who doesn't agree with him. You saw this in this last primary. I happen to live in Larry Rogers Jr.'s Cook County Board of Review District. And Kagi took it upon himself because he doesn't like Larry Rogers Jr. He's going to find someone to primary him. And this is all very funny because the Board of Review is the one who's the people who's supposed to review the appeals against Kagi's office's assessments. So he's like, I don't like what Larry Rogers doing, with lowering assessments. I don't like what he's saying about my assessments. So I was going to try and take him out. Kagi has no regard for anything to do with like taxation, value of homes. He's a very stupid person. And again, 2026, are we going to, we're not going to be Franklin Cole. Are we going to be
actually the Board of Review is fighting amongst themselves on top of that. So it's getting ridiculous.
That's nothing new.
It's getting ridiculous. Bill, go ahead. Bill, you've frozen, so once you come back, we'll jump to you. But in the meantime, a couple things I want to point to. Number one, just the fact that even the Cook County Board, you're looking at 13 of the board's 17 members are calling for a hearing because they want to do a property tax relief rebate program using fees that the Cook County Treasurer collects. And so, I mean, clearly this is becoming more and more of a focus. Bill, it looks like you unfroze, so go ahead and give your thoughts now.
No, that's all right. I pretty much was finished. Go ahead.
Yeah, we didn't actually get you because you froze up, so go ahead and say it again.
Oh, all right. I don't know when I froze up, but what I will say though is that what part of the problem is Cook County is screwed up as far as they changed their computer system. They hired all new people, so nobody knows what's going on down there. And in fact, what's going on right now, roughly 4,000 senior citizens didn't get their senior freeze exemption on their tax bills. So they're sitting there right now looking at a tax bill that's $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 higher than what they were expecting. And they're not going to get their bills fixed. They're going to have to wait for a check from Cook County, which will take them about 6 months before they get it.
So they're going to have to pay the property taxes, the inaccurate bill that's too high because Kagi and his office and everybody else involved couldn't get it fixed in time. That's just incompetence.
Bingo.
That's awful. One other thing I want to point to, we talk about this a lot, and sometimes I get some pushback on why some of these local governments have had to raise their costs because of Springfield and unfunded mandates. And there was a report this week that got mostly ignored from the Illinois Association of School Boards, their 2024 end of session report. And I read something in there that I thought was really interesting because they said that since 1982, the Illinois General Assembly has imposed more than 700 mandates on schools, averaging about 18 a year. 18 to 22 is the number they've come up with. Is a number of mandates that pass every year down in Springfield that are unfunded that get forced on these school districts. And I know townships face the same problem. I know municipalities face the same problem. And I know rightfully so, our school districts get a little bit of a pushback on the fact that they are costly for taxpayers. But a big part of that is that every year our policymakers, led by Democrats and bills that are signed by Governor Pritzker, force these unfunded mandates on these school districts, which force them to raise their taxes 22 times a year. These school districts are forced to find some way to find funding to fund these unfunded mandates. Every year this happens. And so when I say that property taxes are driven by a lot of these Democrat majorities down in Springfield, that's exactly what I'm pointing to, that when you force these mandates on these school districts, it has to be paid. If they're forced to do it and given no funding to do it, then it's the local taxpayers via increased property taxes that have to foot that bill. And so you can draw a direct line from bills that Democrats pass in Springfield that Pritzker signs into law that result in property tax increases on working families. It is a direct line.
Absolutely. And then you look at people like Katie Stewart, she always likes to talk about how I'm a teacher. I understand what goes on in schools, and I'm fighting for, the school districts within my district. But she's the queen of unfunded mandates. She votes for every single one of them. And then, sometimes she even sponsors bills that herself, like tampons for 4th grade boys. And, that cost gets passed on directly to, the homeowners in that district through property taxes.
Michael, is the Katie Stewart for re-election campaign sick and tired of you commenting about those tampons for boys and on her Facebook post yet? Have they declared war on Michael Butler yet?
She always just deletes them. So I don't think very many people see them. I haven't actually commented on that very much, I don't think.
Listen, I love guerrilla warfare in politics, so I'm all for it. I just find it funny when I see, because Facebook's algorithm will sometimes elevate a post, not because the post is somebody that you're tied to, but someone who commented is the person you're tied to. So occasionally I'll just be scrolling and I'll be like, why is Katie Stewart showing up in my feed? And then I see featured comment, Michael Butler, talking about this topic. I'm like, well, you go, Michael. Just keep putting her on defense. I like it.
So we got to do.
Let's move to our next topic, because this is one that's juicy and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. It looks like the Chicago Teachers Union and their president, Stacey Davis Gates, who wants to make sure that her children can go to private schools while everybody else's children cannot. She has declared war on Governor Pritzker. She put out a tweet late last week about how Governor Pritzker, let me quote this, and Lane will bring it up on screen, continuing the tradition of denying funding for Black, brown, working class, and immigrant kids in Illinois' largest school district. Pritzker then was very diplomatic in his response, just basically saying, yeah, they're in the middle of a negotiation, so I totally understand why she's doing this, and I guess kudos for being diplomatic there. So she decided to double down in response and publicly basically say she does not want him to be the nominee for the choice for vice president. Instead, she'd rather have somebody else who's taxed the rich and put social workers in schools. Blah, 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 blah. Governor Pritzker should follow their example. Looks like CTU and Stacey Davis Gates are declaring war on Pritzker. What do you guys think? And Nathan, this is definitely up your alley, so you should kick us off.
I love it. I couldn't be happier to see it. Because JB Pritzker has spent the last several years trying not to piss off Stacey Davis Gates and the CTU, so much so that he, kind of privately tells everybody, oh, I'm for school choice, and then doesn't lift a single finger to do anything about it. And yet Stacey Davis Gates still calls him basically human trash and a racist. And that's what you get. But what I also find interesting is Stacey doesn't want JB Pritzker, who's, didn't do anything for school choice, killed the school choice program. But the guy it seems like might be Kamala's VP, Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania, is a Democratic governor who actually expanded private school choice. So in not getting JB Pritzker, perhaps you're going to get a Democrat who expanded school choice in his purple state. So I couldn't be happier to see the. I mean,
this is dumb on 100 levels, but just strategically, Nathan, isn't this dumb in that if Pritzker leaves, you get your person as governor of the state of Illinois? Like, shouldn't Stacey Davis Gates want Pritzker to leave so that Stratton becomes the governor of Illinois, which is, Stratton is a card-carrying CTU member. Like, it shouldn't, it even seems dumb from that level.
He should, and I don't think Pritzker is going to do this. If he sticks around, my advice to him would be to fund candidates against CTU candidates for the rest of his time in Illinois, just for the fun of it. I don't think he'll do that, and I won't get my wish probably, but
go put money into invest in kids. If CTU is going to oppose you either way, then you know what? Go do what supposedly he believes in, and bring that program back.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is just strategically, though it's pretty clear, Chris, I'd ask you, it's pretty clear that like the CTU only operates well if they have a villain. They need somebody they could vilify. They obviously can't do that with Chicago's mayor since he's their handpicked choice. So they had to go looking somewhere else for a boogeyman to attack. It seems like they've settled on what I think is a pretty dumb choice, but hey, I don't mind if they're going to be stupid on their side of the aisle.
Yeah, speaking of political terrorists, I think the CTU leadership is a pretty good example of this one. It's kind of in they had a good thing going on for a few years. They had Rahm Emanuel, who they didn't get along with. They had Lightfoot, who they certainly didn't get along with. So they were able to create like a nice little, divide between the city of Chicago. They're like, this is the mayor. They're doing a bad thing against the teachers, and that's really affects our children. Now they got their own guy in there, and he's kind of screwing up the city of Chicago, but he's giving them everything they want. So they got to find someone else they can screw with. And really, the next person on the totem pole is JB Pritzker, unfortunately. So they're gonna roll with this until basically either JB gives up and gives them everything they want, likely scenario, or he decides to fight them and does what Nathan was saying and fund candidates against them in these school board elections. You won't do that. So probably the third likely choice is that there's going to be like a middle ground where nothing gets accomplished, and both sides are unhappy with what's going on, and both sides kind of claim victory. That's what kind of happens in these scenarios. But the teachers union, they're just going to keep fighting for people until we get around to 2026 and 2027 when somebody else runs for mayor and Johnson loses, and it'll be a whole other shit show.
Yeah, this is true. Anybody else have thoughts on this? And then I want to go to those Chicago teachers elections or those school board elections. Everybody good? All right. I just never want to cut anybody off here. All right. Let's go to the next topic. And Nathan, we'll start with you on this one. We have wanted to talk about the Chicago school board elections, but we frankly, other than Chris and I, we haven't had a lot of people on here who know a lot of what's going on there. And Chris and I are on the outside, so we don't even know a bunch. But we got Nathan here who has a good idea what's happening. So I really want to just bring it to you. What's going on with these races? The money is definitely starting to flow, and it looks like there's two pretty substantial PACs that are starting to get involved against some of these teacher union candidates. Looks like these might be some real races coming up in November.
Yeah, and one of them, just for I guess transparency purposes, one of them I'm part of as treasurer or secretary or whatever my role is on it. But I think the whole goal is not to necessarily run conservative candidates who will get in there and produce a conservative outcome if they get elected on the school board. The
Chicago,
goal,
right? I mean,
right, it's Chicago. Yeah, the goal is to find reasonable parents, predominantly parents who are public school parents who are concerned about what's going on with CTU, with Brandon Johnson, et cetera, who are representative of the districts, pretty big districts at this point that they will be representing, and who can put up a good enough fight in an election where really nobody's going to have any information on who these people are. That's part intentional. I think we want to kind of have a like a bit of mystique around. I think both sides want a bit of mystique around the election, CTU and us, in the hopes that you get a few more of your people to come out and you tell them who to vote for quietly. So at the end of the day, my projection, I'm a little pessimistic on this, despite the fact that I'm working on it. And I think if we can win 3 or 4 of the 10 races, I think that's good enough to be a thorn in the side of Brandon Johnson and the CTU.
Let's be real. 3 or 4 seats is more than we have right now of people who are reasonable. And listen, I like the approach. I mean, nonpartisan. This is the city of Chicago. This is a nonpartisan race. We're not looking for R versus D here. We're looking for reasonable people who will represent the parents versus maybe just being on the board to represent the wishes of CTU. I feel like that's a pretty good narrative that will work with Chicago parents, especially those who are pretty frustrated by the political actions of this union. They love their teachers, but the teachers union is right on that edge of having some pretty high unfavorables.
That's right. And I think one of the issues that we found, first of all, Brandon Johnson's polling is in the trash. So anytime you can kind of pin him to an issue, associate him with an issue, it polls extremely well, obviously. The other piece is there are missteps that, going back to the CTU, that the CTU and Brandon have taken in their kind of political terrorism, going after selective enrollment schools, which is a completely unforced error that they didn't need to do. And it at least in the Asian parts of the city, have really driven up a lot of attention to the school district that was otherwise not there. And so what we've been able to do is pick out issues like that and say, if we've got a candidate who is not going to close down or, completely rehabilitate these selective enrollment schools. If you're interested in that, here's our candidate. And we're not talking about anything else. That's the issue. And it's been effective thus far.
Nice. Chris, on the money side, you and I talked a lot, and you were the one who pointed to this. that to get Brandon Johnson elected, CTU had to not only empty their coffers, they had to borrow against future funds. And so now you're looking at a situation where CTU just doesn't have a lot of money. It was reported this week they have just 176K in their two accounts as of the end of last month. Meanwhile, this new PAC that's surfaced has got 575,000 already. INCS Action raised $1 million last quarter. I mean, the money disparity is pretty strong here, and I don't know how quickly the CTU can reverse that trend. What do you think, Chris?
Well, the thing is that, as I've kind of alluded to on previous podcasts, is that a lot of the money that's going into the anti-CTU PAC is historically Republican money, Republican donors, but they also donate to people like Vallis, and they donate to people like Rahm Emanuel. I bet you some of them probably donated to Burke. So they're going to look for a return on their investment here again. And if these donors can kick these people out of the CTU people out of the Chicago School Board, another reason for them not to donate to Republican causes anymore, because it's working for them just fine with nonpartisan and Democratic ones. In any case, yes, this is a big problem for the Chicago Teachers Union because they're low on funds and they're low on morale. They're kind of low on manpower right now as well. Some of this money will come. Presume Brandon Johnson or some other Tony Preckwinkle-esque back channel will find a way to get more money into the pro-CTU side, be that from other service unions like the SEIU or other progressive unions. The money will show up from somewhere, but I don't think it'll be as much as they need. We've already seen that they ran into problems with the Bring Chicago Home referendum, and Clayton Harris ran into problems fundraising for his campaign in the state's attorney's race. So progressive money isn't as fruitful as it this time around as it has been previously. An advantage for the conservative side of this equation. So let's do a good job here, guys. Let's get another win out of the city of Chicago this time.
I mean, again, I know you use the conservative side. I don't even know if that's what this is. It's the more reasonable side of the argument, or a more reasonable side of the discussion. But Nathan, just to make sure we have this, I've had a number of people ask me who live in the city of Chicago, how do I know which candidate is which? Is there a website, or will there be a website that you guys put out or someone puts out that says these are the candidates that are more reasonable, that will actually represent parents? Is there some place we can send people to that they're asking which candidates are the ones we should be actually looking at? Is there somewhere that exists, or will there be?
Yeah, I mean, there's not right now. I mean, the Tribune and others have covered all of the candidates and sort of whether they have some connections to CTU world, or whether those connections are maybe not there or looser. So, maybe it's TBD, Collin, and we can talk about it closer to the election.
All right. Well, we don't want this to be the last time we cover this topic, so we'll have you back as we get closer. And for our listeners or watchers, if you're in the city or close to the city, we'll help you out and know which of these candidates are ones you should maybe be helping get across the finish line, because these are going to be big races. This will have a big impact on not just the city of Chicago, but the whole state of Illinois. So these are definitely races people should be paying attention to. So this won't be the last time we talk about this. Anyone else have thoughts on the Chicago school board races before we move on to the next topic? All right, let's go to this. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to make one final comment, which is I think there are groups, not the one necessarily that I'm associated with, but there are groups who are quietly looking for these school board elections to be a catapult into supporting a bigger name candidate who might run for the president of the school board in whenever the next election is, and then ultimately into the mayor's office. So I would keep an eye on that too.
Interesting. Thanks for that insight.
Really know. Yeah.
All right, let's talk statewide. There's a couple things that have popped over the last week and a half, 2 weeks here. And this is a frequent topic for us, which is cost of living in the state of Illinois. It continues to rise. People need to be aware of two different stories here, because cost of living is going to go up even more for Illinois residents, especially in the Chicagoland area. So the first one I want to call people's attention to is electric bills. So nationwide, 20% of Americans are going to face significantly higher electric bills, including most of Northern Illinois. You're seeing, I don't want to get in the weeds on this, but there's a story in Bloomberg, which Chicago Cranes picked up on, and then a few other people have been picking up on it, which is essentially that you're looking at electricity costs are going to be going up massively. In some places, they're going up over 800%, like in New Jersey, they're going up over 800% for some people. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen here in the state of Illinois. We don't have the exact numbers just yet. But what every indicator we are seeing is that because of the closure of coal plants, of natural gas-fired plants being removed from the grid, the cost of electricity is going sky high right now, and we're going to see these in these bills soon. Will it happen before November? I don't know. Some of these things have a bit of a lagging indicator when it gets to bills, but it's coming, and these are going to be significant increases, all because of, yet again, that we're going back to the CEJA debate and everything else. As you close down these plants and lower the supply to the grid, what's left there is going to be more expensive. It's simple supply and demand. The demand hasn't gone down, but supply has, and costs are going to go significantly higher, and that's going to touch almost every community in Northern Illinois. The other thing that we're looking at is that monthly water bills are going to be going up for any customers of Illinois American Water. They're going to be going up about $30 per household. Yet again, another bill is going up for working households, and if you look at this list, these communities are all throughout the state of Illinois, including Palatine, so Bill, yay for us. But these water bills are going to be going up all throughout the state of Illinois. So we've got electric bills exploding. We've got water bills going up about $30 per household. Yet again, we're talking about how the cost of living in this state is just exploding. Anybody have thoughts on that?
I just looked back at my electric bill just to see, over the last 2 years, what has happened. And it's literally 2 years ago, July of 2022, it's doubled since then. So I would hate it. I do not want to see what it's going to be, moving forward, because it seems like it just keeps going up, and it just adds to that cost of living issue that a lot of people across this state are dealing with. And I think it's just another opportunity for us as Republicans, that's for sure.
I mean, Bill, I don't know if in Palatine, I'm not as clued into Palatine politics, so I'd ask you if maybe I missed it. I didn't see the village put out, hey, water bills are going to be going up. And then I got my bill and it went up significantly. I was like, what the heck happened? And I love our elected officials here in Palatine. And I even almost like, I'm going to go to a meeting. What the heck's going on here? Maybe they did communicate it and I missed it. But the water bills a couple bills ago, it popped significantly. And I was like, where the heck did this come from?
Yeah, I haven't seen anything as far as the water bills. I mean, they just did the state of Palatine and basically said we're not going to have any bad debt after they finish paying off a lot of these last bills. But I haven't seen anything at all about this as far as the water bills go. But as far as it goes,
they've done a great job of keeping costs down. I love living in Palatine because Schwantz and the team, they've done an awesome job keeping costs down. So if they raised it, they had to raise it. I would just say a little bit of a misstep in that if even I didn't know, and I'm pretty plugged in, I probably wasn't the only Palatine resident who got their bill and went, what the heck just happened? And according to what I'm reading in the news, that's going to happen again. No fault of Palatine, but that's apparently going to happen again very soon.
Well, Collin, you got to remember, this is politics. You talk about the good things, about how we're not going to have any bad debt. You don't tell us about the bad things.
Yeah, true.
But as far as it goes, I mean, we're looking at gas prices going up through the ceiling, and that our heating bills and they're going up. I mean, once again, this is on the Democrats. I mean, they're stopping us for drilling for oil, and they're cutting back on what we can do as far as coal goes. I mean, if that doesn't help us in the election,
how long has this moratorium on nuclear power in Illinois been in place? Yeah, they just raised it, but it was the Democrats who kept that moratorium in place, which again is a supply problem. We've been screaming about this for a long time. You want to close these coal plants, you want to close these gas plants. It's going to have to come from somewhere, and renewable energy has not reached that point yet. So when people are going to be heating their houses this winter, they're going to be paying out their rear ends to do it. Mm-hmm. Matt, you want to jump in, or are you just taking a deep breath there, buddy?
I think this is a good opportunity for Republicans because I think we've always been behind the curve when it comes to environmental and sustainability issues. And you can't really argue with the left when saying, oh, we want to save the planet. And they say all these abstract things. But if you could tie their policies directly to how this is affecting everyday people with rising costs, I think this is a great counterbalance to all the stuff that all these local Democrat politicians run on, because all the county board people and all the state reps, a lot of them run on, we got to protect the environment. We got to protect our forest preserves, which is true, but also look at what you're doing when you're taking away from natural gas and raising up electricity prices.
I mean, we all predicted it would happen, and here we go, it's happening. But a lot of these are based on bills and initiatives that Democrats have pushed forward. It leaves an opening for Republicans. Again, the high-arching narrative is cost of living. That is the number one issue right now for voters, and it remains so, and it's only going to be more between now and November as we talk about these things that are going to impact it. If you're a Republican candidate in the state of Illinois, you need to be talking about cost of living and point to, every time something like this comes up, point to it. It's another excuse to talk about your issue. While the Democrats try to get us talking about weird and threats to democracy and abortion and IVF and all those different issues, we want to bring it back to cost of living every chance we can get. And anytime anything like energy bills, water bills gets in the news, we've got to be talking about it because that plays right into cost of living. Property taxes is another cost of living. We got to be talking about it if we're going to win. All right, let's go to another topic. Chris, your buddy Pat Quinn seems to be back on the stage. I know you've missed Quinn, so I'm really excited for you to have your buddy back in the national stage or in the statewide stage in the news. As we've talked about in previous episodes, there will be 3 ballot questions on everybody's ballot in the state of Illinois. One of those is a surcharge on millionaires, a 3% surcharge on millionaires on their income tax to lower property taxes. Let's be clear, this is a non-binding referendum, so it actually means basically nothing. However, Pat Quinn is going to be leading an effort to try to pass that referendum. So, Chris, I'm curious what you're thinking about what's going to happen there.
God bless Pat Quinn. He just can't take a break from the cause of good government. Every cycle, it seems like Pat's always doing something. He almost ran for mayor of Chicago in 2023. He probably would have beaten Brandon Johnson, unfortunately. But in any case, Pat Quinn's back into the arena, and he's really high on this 3% surcharge for millionaires because I guess the state's trying to see where people are at with this amendment because I guess this is the test. This is a poll, basically. That's all this is. This is the greatest poll ever conducted by state.
A taxpayer-funded poll.
It's a taxpayer-funded poll. It's like, hey, are you good with the 3% surcharge on millionaires? If it means lesser property taxes for you, and I guarantee this referendum is probably going to pass, and then they're gonna be like, okay, and then they just take out the part without the property taxes, put the property taxes back into messaging for a poll in 2026 or 2028 or whatever happens there. So Pat Quinn's going to be the schmuck that they roll out there to be the face of good government. And, it's good old Pat Quinn. He never steered us wrong, even though he might have 12 years ago. We kind of all forgot about it, but that's okay. And, Pat's going to do it because Pat believes in this kind of stuff. So, good. That's good for the state of Illinois. We're going to tax millionaires maybe in 2 years. Yay. I'm actually being 100% serious right now. The Republican Party should back this so we can tax millionaires, but they never will.
Yeah, it's not going in your pocket, Chris.
Yeah. What'd you say,
They're
Matt?
taxing Colin's pocket, right?
I said it's not going to Chris's pocket, so why does he care?
That's fair. I mean, listen, this is clearly a trial balloon. They're going to have to find revenue next year and the year after that. And obviously it didn't work super well for them when they tried to pass a progressive tax in Illinois. So this is, as you said, this is a statewide effort to figure out what the numbers might be so they can figure out how to plug the budget hole next year and beyond. So that's all this is. But it's interesting that Quinn becomes the face of it, which is just kind of weird to me. But hey.
Well, else would you have be the face of this, Collin? You can't have JB be the face of this. Like, it didn't work in 2020 when you tried making JB to be the face of the progressive tax amendment. So I think that this is like Pat Quinn's basically like everybody's favorite uncle, like Jimmy Carter. Was Jimmy Carter a good president? Probably not. I think he's underrated comparatively to like how people think, how bad he was, but that's neither here nor there. Pat Quinn's the same thing. Was Pat Quinn a bad governor? Probably, but looking back on him, you're kind of like, yeah, remember when Pat Quinn was governor? Life was simpler back then. I always thought he was a straight shooter. That's what everybody thinks about Pat Quinn. He's a straight shooter. So that's why they're rolling out him, because he's
even though he was the worst governor in America, which is why the next worst governor in America actually had a chance at winning, which is what led us to this point in Illinois in the first place.
Well, I just wonder, is he basically just like the self-appointed face of this, or did they actually like go to him and say like, "Hey, Pat, can you lead the charge on this?" But you look at
nobody appointed Pat Quinn. Pat Quinn never gets appointed. He just says, "Hey, I'm going to put on a press conference," and now we're all living in Pat Quinn's world.
Exactly. But then you think about like, okay, 2020, they tried doing this with with the constitutional amendment. It failed. Then they tried doing it again with the Bring Chicago Home referendum. That failed. And really what it comes down to is the voters don't trust them on this issue. They make all these promises and say, hey, we're going to raise taxes on these people and lower your taxes. We promise, we're not going to raise yours. And
Trust
then,
us.
look at what happens. So I don't know. We'll see. I'd say that it probably, gets a majority, but I don't think that it's going to be like, 60% or 65% or something like that. I think it'll be a little tighter, and we'll see what they do with it, but it's not binding, so it doesn't really matter.
All right, last topic for the week. We got to talk about this. The Illinois Democrats launched their Organized Illinois 2024 campaign. The Democratic Party is going to be working on races in Congress, the General Assembly, even local government, putting their money, putting their focus on it. They said, let's see if I can find it in this press release, what they planned on doing here. Here we go. The new coordination will include regional meetings, messaging, support, voter protection efforts, paid media campaigns. The data team can provide insights to a lot of their candidates, voter mobilization, field volunteers, field offices. It seems like this could be a fairly robust effort throughout the state of Illinois, working top to bottom. So we got to talk about it. Anybody have thoughts on this Organized Illinois 2024 campaign by the Democrats?
Democrats could have done one of those things for their statewide initiative. It would have been better, whatever the state party's putting out right now, unfortunately. On our side of the ticket, that's not a gripe against the state party or anything like that. It just seems like the Democrats, the one thing the Democrats do is like, oh, wow, that's like, that would like completely change the entire equation in the state of, the Republican Party in the state. It's just kind of depressing at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly would love to have the resources to play at this level. If Republicans do the one job we have as a party, which is turn out our voters, then I'll be happy, which that's the whole point of this Bank Your Vote campaign. It's to turn out our voters. And that's frankly, you got to start there. So I'm happy that that's where they're focused on, because if they can get Republicans to the polls, our candidates can focus on swing voters. So kudos to the party. Hopefully that initiative does work. That said, I'd love to live in a world where we could have a much more robust presence like Democrats do here. Again, it's a press release. We'll see if they actually do this, but it does look like they're planning on running a pretty robust statewide effort. And a man can dream that one day Republicans could do that in the state too. One thing I found interesting in this is when they talk about the federal races, they brought up only 2 congressional districts. One is obvious, which is Sorensen being pretty vulnerable in IL-17. They also brought up Budzinski as one of their 2 targets. I don't really understand this. I mean, listen, I'd love it if Joshua Lloyd made a race of it, but Lloyd's got about 10K. No, he raised about 10K last quarter. He's got about 3,000 in the bank. Budzinski's got over 2 million. So I don't know that race is really in play at this point. So why Democrats called out both Sorensen and Budzinski to focus on, that was kind of, I don't understand that. Am I missing something there?
Is that maybe because I know the DCCC or whatever their abbreviation is, they have that on their list of like, these are the races that we're protecting in this state. So it may be kind of like, hey, let's throw a bone to the DC Democrats and say, hey, we got your back here.
Plus, they're trying to prop Budzinski up for future things, and if that's the other way I could see this. But the other thing is, it also has to do about numbers. They see IL-13, like, that was Rodney Davis's seat. Now it's Nikki Budzinski's seat. Republicans can win this seat. That's like the very simplistic way of looking at the world from like the Democratic perspective. And even Republicans fall into this trap too sometimes. Not even looking at data. It's just like, that district number mean that. That mean we lose. Something like that. Like caveman thing.
Could be.
It makes sense that you were a Democrat operative now, Chris. It's all coming together.
All right. We close down with this every time. It's our OG and Clown of the Week, where everyone on this podcast gets a chance to nominate anybody they'd like or multiple people that they think deserves praise or scorn from this last week. We like to have some fun with this. So what do you guys got? Anybody you want to give special praise to or point to as maybe deserving a bit of scorn this week?
I've got some scorn, and I don't know how to fare on this podcast, but Governor Jim Edgar, who came out and endorsed Kamala Harris for president. I don't think he's been relevant in 20 years to me, but I wish we would have talked about that maybe on this podcast, because I have a lot of thoughts on it, but I'll leave that nomination for what it is. Former governor of Illinois endorsing Kamala Harris for president.
It will certainly light up our Discord once this episode comes up, because we've got a lot of Edgar lovers who have been previous guests on this podcast, who I'm sure will come back in the future and want to fight you on that. So maybe we set that up, have some fun with it. Because, yeah, I mean, listen, it doesn't do us any good when Republicans are out there endorsing Democrats. It's like Kinzinger not only endorsing Biden, but then putting out a fundraising text for Biden. The endorsement I could kind of live with, maybe, not really, but maybe. But then doing a fundraising text nationwide to try to raise money for the guy, which, by the way, was pretty funny. It was hours before Biden tanked at the debate. That text went out. So then Kinzinger looked kind of stupid because of it, which people kind of felt like, okay, well, that's what you get. But but we've got a lot of people who are fans of Edgar and Kinzinger who I'm sure are going to be angry at me because you did that. But hey, I think it's a valid opinion and you're right to express how you feel.
No, Colin, I got you on it for you, so you don't take the heat. I do. So if Nathan wasn't going to say it, I was, because this is completely stupid. Because Mr. Edgar Ramp, the reason why the state's pension crisis is so fucked up, but nobody will admit to that. It was the Republicans' fault that the state's pension crisis is fucked up. He's saying, oh yeah, I'm going to vote for Kamala Harris as a vote against Trump. We live in Illinois. You can vote for whoever you want against Trump, and you will be voting against Trump. You can vote for the Libertarian. You can vote for RFK. You can write in yourself. You can write in Collin. You can write in whoever you want, Mickey Mouse, and you will be voting against Trump. But no, you have to take it one step further, and I'm gonna vote for the progressive Democratic nominee to really show the orange man what I'm about. Come on, Jim Edgar. You're right. Hasn't been relevant in 20 years. Put this state's finances down the tubes well before Rauner did. So good riddance to Jim Edgar. Don't care about who you're voting for, bud.
Who else has OG or Clown of the Week nominations they want to make? It was mentioned earlier. I want to give an OG to former Congressman Rodney Davis, taking over to head government affairs at the U.S. Chamber. Congrats to Rodney. I think that's pretty cool, and I say congrats to Rodney Davis on that.
Clown of the Week, Paul Dans, the Project 2025 CEO or director or whatever, who just resigned. That was kind of a dumpster, but
Duray, who else you got? You were known for being the one-liner king, the controversy king when you're on these podcasts. What do you got? Give me something juicy here, man.
I was also going to say that whoever put together the opening ceremony for the Olympics, they were pretty clowny.
For two reasons. Let's be honest. The dance acts at the beginning being completely out of sync and looking like they were amateurish. That was just pretty rough watching. And then that whole ending with the drag show thing, which it was, everyone liked to say it was the Feast of Dionysus or Dionysus. I don't know how to say it properly because I'm not learned. But from one angle with the halo, it was clearly also meant to push at the Last Supper as well. It was not unintentional. So I don't think you're wrong on that, Matt, that there was a purposeful effort there to create controversy. And congratulations, you succeeded. You created controversy.
I got one more too. Just because for old time's sakes, Joe Severino, where he didn't file his petitions and now because he pulled a Republican ballot in the primary, he couldn't run as an independent, so that's kind of ridiculous. And let's give
the full story. He was going to run as a Republican, failed. Then he was going to run as a Democrat and failed. Then he was going to run as an independent, but couldn't because he didn't even know the law. And now he's running as a write-in candidate. Our buddy Joe Weiss is going to open up a fundraiser for squares on will he get from anywhere from 0 to 50 votes in the election. And like a Super Bowl squares, he's just going to have people sign up for one of those squares. I think it's kind of fun.
Good idea. What's he going to do today? And also he's going back to people's Facebook posts from like 2014 and just, I don't know how much time he has, but apparently a lot if he's going to be doing that deep dive on people who, why would he care about them? So
fair. I got a Clown of the Week. The trade deadline just passed. And my Clown of the Week is the entire White Sox organization. Because you've not seen a more abysmal trade deadline performance than what the White Sox just pulled. The players we basically traded for buckets of balls, and that was it. And then we couldn't trade any of our marquee players for anything of any substance. This is just, this organization keeps circling the drain, and it's all the way down the drain at this point. So Clown of the Week for me is the whole White Sox organization.
Yeah, unfortunately, what I don't like, Colin, is you traded him to the Cardinals. So you're helping the Cardinals against my Cubs.
A player from the White Sox going to the Cardinals, if they weren't good enough to be on the White Sox, trust me, they ain't helping the Cubs or the Cardinals any. So maybe
Valid point. Well, as my person is basically ever since he got elected, Brandon Johnson. I enjoy every week when something comes out about the immigrants coming to Chicago and what he has to say.
All right. Chris has basically put that he should be a permanent choice for Clown of the Week every week.
Oh, I'll vote for that.
There we go. I got a pretty something that's going to shock some people. I have given, I'll use his name this time, Rich Miller from Capital Facts. I have given him grief on these podcasts in the past, though I don't ever use his name. At least I don't think I have. But I'm going to give him an OG of the Week nomination because twice in the past week, he has actually dipped his toe into holding Pritzker accountable. And I don't see this often from the left, and I never see it from Rich Miller and Capital Facts. And so I have to give him kudos. I'll give you both of those. First, he said, no more excuses from JB Pritzker. If you've been following the state, there is a huge problem with licensing in the state. We've talked about it in previous episodes of this podcast. And Rich Miller actually came out and said, you know what? This is under JB Pritzker. No more excuses. Fix this problem. He did it softer than that because, you know, he can't attack Pritzker because that's where he makes a lot of his money. But I will still give him credit. He actually did push back a little bit. And then this one blew my mind because I didn't even think of this, but he actually dinged Pritzker a little bit. He asked him because Pritzker constantly calls Trump a convicted felon. And I wish I had thought of this. Rich Miller asked him basically, listen, in a state like Illinois, where you are trying and the Democrats are trying to move away from using language like that, is it hypocritical to be calling Trump a convicted felon when in your own state, you're actually trying to move away from language like that? I didn't think of that. That was a pretty good angle to take. And frankly, it's pretty accurate. Kudos to Rich Miller for even bringing that up. Again, I got to give kudos where it's due, even when somebody tends to disagree with what we believe on this podcast. 2 different times this week, Rich Miller kind of a little bit held Pritzker accountable. I'd love to see more of it, but he certainly gets an OG nomination from me for doing that.
Collin, isn't it a little dangerous for a governor of Illinois to use the word criminal?
Yeah, right. I mean, he's only tempting fate on that one. All right, let's close on this podcast. As always, every one of our participants gets a chance to close on their thoughts from the week, no matter what those thoughts might be on. Bill, you're the last person who spoke here, so let me have you kick us off. Thoughts on whatever you want to close the episode with.
Well, right now, I mean, as you had mentioned at the beginning of this, I'm vice chairman of the PTRO, and I've been watching the local races here with Tossie and with Michelle Hunter. And I'm praying they're out there working, and I'm hoping that we can get some representation for the Republican Party back in Palatine Township.
And we'd all love to see that. So keep up the good work. All right, let's go with Chris. What are your closing thoughts of the week?
My closing thoughts of the week aren't going to be as optimistic as they were last week. The Chicago White Sox will set a new record for losses. Straight losses by a team. I believe the record's 26. We're at 17. White Sox will beat that. They will go down as the worst team in the history of baseball. Nothing is ever good in my life. All my teams lose. None of my teams win.
Wow.
I don't know why I do this for a living.
Yeah, listen, man, it is rough. When I nominated the White Sox for Clown of the Week, I meant to talk about their record too. So thank you for bringing it up. It wasn't just for failing at the trade deadline. They've been failing even beyond that. So couldn't agree with you even more. Michael, closing thoughts, buddy.
Yeah, one of the things that I submitted that we didn't get to talk about was the fact that, you know, between like the Kamala Harris campaign trying to erase her entire, you know, record and everything that she's ever said that, you know, could damage her chances. The fake news media is also going out of their way, including going as far as deleting articles about her being the border czar and trying to cover that up. So I think it's important for us as we, you know, move deeper into this election cycle to just keep pounding the Democrats on those statements that she has made in the past, because there's a lot there. She's the new John Kerry, you know, she takes whatever position she thinks she needs to take in that moment, and makes it hard to trust her.
That's for dang sure. Duray, I am pumped that you came back with us. I've missed you, my buddy. Give us your closing thoughts.
Yes, I'm sure we can all relate to this. You know, people know that I'm political. So every time something happens in the news, they want to text me and they're like, oh my gosh, did you hear what happened with Trump or with Biden? Yes, first of all, I did hear. Second of all, I want to tell those people, you can't even name me your state rep or your county board member or your state senator, and you get all wrapped up in the national stuff. So if you can't come back to me and tell me one local elected official, you have no right to have any opinion on anything going on nationally. So that's my soapbox, and I'm strongly passionate about that.
That's a dang good soapbox. I mean, you think about the impact on our daily lives. It's local government, it's state government, it's county government. They have way bigger impacts on people's daily lives than national. So I think it's a great point to end on, Matt. Thank you. Nathan, you brought the heat this week, so you get to be the final word on this podcast. Closing thoughts, bud.
So I do hope that the Trump campaign in the next week figures out a viable line of attack besides is Kamala an Indian or is she black, because that's not going to work. But so that's my one hope. And then number two, which is just ending on a lighter note, track and field at the Olympics starts tomorrow. And that's where you will find me for the next 10 days, is sitting in front of my TV watching that.
All right, we're releasing this on Friday, so track and field opens on Friday, Nathan.
Hey, yeah, that's right.
I just want to make sure we, so it'll be when people watch this, don't bother Nathan once you watch this. He's busy for a while. Let him watch track and field, then you can bother him. All right, PSA for everybody. I like it. All right, well, thank you to everybody for watching. Thank you to our guests. A couple thanks to our team. So Lane Davis, our producer, who works really hard on getting our guests together and running these episodes. I also want to give a shout out to Ryan Kilduff. We're recording this on Thursday, and today is his 11th anniversary at Core Strategies. In the era of people not sticking around at the same place for more than a couple of years, to be able to rely on Ryan and our team for 11 years. Love you, buddy. Thank you for that. So I want to give him some kudos. To our watchers, the month of August is going to be huge in politics, and the Smoke-Filled Room is going to be on the road multiple times in the month of August, doing some pretty cool episodes. So you're going to want to make sure you tune in because we've got some special episodes coming up. In the meantime, y'all have a good week. Go kick butt in politics, and we will catch you next week on the Smoke-Filled Room.